Hello, church. Welcome to Leviticus 11 and 12. And you might be if you glance at your Bible and you think we're going to be talking about clean and unclean food and childbirth, and you might be wondering, if this is your first time through Leviticus, you might be wondering, what are we going to be talking about today? I'll tell you already. Jesus. These things all remind us of things Jesus either did or said or who he is. It's fascinating. And there's even some mysteries here that lead us right to Jesus. Let me explain just a little bit. So in chapter 11, you have these different animals that are clean or unclean. In the first couple chapters, it talks about land animals. First couple verses, it talks about land animals. And then verse 9 to 12 talks about animals in the water. Verse 13 to 19 talks about animals in the air. And verse 20 to 23 talks about insects, and you have this definition of clean and unclean. What is the rationale that God is using to determine which ones are clean and unclean? I don't know exactly. Sometimes it seems like it might be hygiene related, and yet that doesn't explain all of them. And there might be some other explanations, but there is no explanation that seems to just perfectly suit. And so there seems to be actually some mystery to that. And so while we don't understand the rationale maybe exactly with what God's getting at here, it seems like he is using these separation laws to train the Israelites on how to obey here, and then it'll remind them of how to obey when it comes to the moral laws, which again makes a clear connection to us. So in the New Testament, when you read this chapter, then it's really nice to connect it to Acts chapter 10, for instance, where God is going to give Peter a picture of a sheet coming down, or something like a sheet coming down from heaven with animals on it. Guess what kind of animals? Exactly the same kind of animals that Leviticus 11 says are unclean. It's the reptiles, the birds, the four-footed animals, and so on. Fascinating. In Mark chapter 7, Jesus will even go on to say that all foods are clean. And so we know this is actually just a separation law, if you will. But attached to it is a moral law of holiness. If you look at verse 44 and 45, for instance, God says, do these things because I am holy. That's a moral law, which 1 Peter 1 makes very clear applies to us today too. Be holy because God is holy. And so we could ask ourselves a question like this today. Am I willing to live a holy life dedicated to God, even when I don't understand all of the reasons why he would have me live a certain way? But just say, yes, Lord, and love it. And then you get into chapter 12. It's about purification after childbirth. And you're thinking, what on earth? Why would somebody have to offer a sacrifice after giving birth to a child? Like, is that a sinful thing? No, it's not. Right? There's other chapters in Leviticus that are even going to connect for women. Even going through her menstrual period is going to be unclean. And so those are not sinful things. God created menstrual periods. He created childbirth. They're not sinful things, but he's getting at something here. Okay, so when here it talks about this woman who is unclean 7 to 14 days, purification days between 33 and 66, depending on male or female. And here we need to be cautious. This is not a chapter about value, okay? Genesis 1 says we are created in God's image, male and female. That's where we get our value. This is not a chapter about value, okay? But what God is getting at here is something like this. And it's even worth noting that even during this purification days, this woman is not disconnected from her family. She's able to go through her daily regimen and care for those people that she loves and still in community with them. She's just simply not able to touch the sacred things or go to the sanctuary. Then she has to offer this ceremonial sacrifice to be clean once again. And so a good way of understanding this chapter is to recognize this. Think about the value of blood and think about birth, okay? When we recognize the value of blood, this is going to be a clear connection that the life is in the blood. And so maybe it's along the lines that with a lack of blood, where actually there's an uncleanness because the life comes from the blood. And this points us to Jesus because we recognize that the wages of sin is death. Without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. We need Jesus' blood. And so this, we say the life is in the blood, which is what Leviticus, I think it's chapter 17 is going to say. That's where we get the life. We get the life from Jesus' blood. And this chapter points us to that. It also points us to birth. Okay? Ever since Adam, our sinful nature has been passing down this contamination of anybody's birth. And it points out here too that everybody's birth, male or female, is, let's call it, tainted with sin. What's the solution? We need to be reborn. That's exactly what Jesus told Nicodemus in John chapter 3. Celebrate that with Jesus today. Celebrate that he and his blood has made you clean, and celebrate that we can be reborn in him. And you get that right here in Leviticus chapter 12. Celebrate that with Jesus today. Enjoy your day with him.